The meeting is now open for the sharing of testimonies of healing through Christian Science. Chardell.
Good evening, and thank you for those readings on the mission of Christian Science. I am grateful to be here and grateful to be able to tell of a healing that I had recently. As I was thinking about how to write about what happened, I remembered from the Bible study last weekend where Christ Jesus healed a man who had been blind since birth. One commentary related that the blind man didn't see Christ, but Christ saw him. This is true for us today. Several weeks ago, I was awakened by an awful pain. At that moment, I wasn't aware of the Christ right away, but he is always aware of me, and I suddenly remembered that Mrs. Eddy said if anything happens in the night, to get up and get dressed. So I got up and sat in a chair. I began praying about truths I had learned about body from an article written by Mary Baker Eddy that is on our website. There is one God, so one body, one power, one activity. This is God's body, and he is made manifest in my body and all bodies. Soon I found myself nodding off in sleep, and I realized that the pain had completely disappeared. I returned to bed and slept for the remainder of the night. I did pray to know that the healing could not be reversed in any way, and the pain never returned. We may not see Christ, but he always sees us. I think about this every day now. Thank you.
Thank you. Candy from Wisconsin. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm really happy to finally be able to be here, and I would like to express my gratitude to Mary Baker Eddy for Christian Science and for this church for teaching me how to use it. Recently, I retired and have been bombarded by well-meaning individuals with claims of identity, usefulness, and so forth. When I told my practitioner I was going to retire, she gave me hymn number 46 as one of the items to study, and I'd like to read the fourth stanza. Thou my daily task shalt give. Day by day to thee I live. So shall added years fulfill, not my own, my Father's will. This particular hymn and the other things I was given to study have given me the ammunition needed to dispel these false claims, and I am greatly enjoying my new adventure. Thank you, and have a blessed night.
Thank you. Gary.
Thank you very much for those readings tonight. I'd like to tell of God's protection that we experienced recently. As many of you know, the northeastern United States experienced what's referred to as a nor'easter a couple weeks ago, which is a severe storm with snow and heavy winds. And prior to the storm, everyone in the church was asked to watch and pray and handle the weather and pray that the weather not be destructive, but that God's will be done. And everybody did pray. And just as background, my wife and I live out in the country a little bit of New Jersey, where it is heavily forested. And there are hills. There's a hill right next to our house, which is very heavily forested with very large old trees. I mean, some are like 100 feet tall. It's referred to as the last of the great eastern forest. But they're beautiful, magnificent trees. Well, a couple of those trees are actually fairly close to our house. And so during that storm, as we were home and praying, doing God's work, one of those very large trees came down in the windstorm. However, it did not come down the hill, which would have been towards our house, where it would have hit our house. It came down at an angle alongside the edge of the hill, where it missed our house. And it didn't make any sense logically that it would fall in that direction. But it was clearly God's protection. Our house was unharmed entirely as a result of that storm. And we were able to carry on and do what God had for us to do. I'm so grateful for God's protection. I'm so grateful to be a member of this church where we have such wonderful work to do for God and for mankind. I'm grateful for Mary Baker Eddy for having persevered and given to the world this wonderful, tremendous science and way of life. It's good to be with you all tonight.
Thank you. Luann from New York.
Thank you. I would like to take this time tonight to celebrate life and to give gratitude for the mighty work God has done through my Christian Science practitioner and the activities of this church. Before coming into Christian Science, I was caught up in a terrible state of mind. My life experiences and lack of understanding of God had me so deep in despair that I saw no other way out but to kill myself. Death became a game to me. I started taking heavy doses of pain medication at night before I went to bed just to see how close to the edge I could get. With the amount of pills I was taking, I could have died at any time. I went to work every day and danced with the devil all night. I was reliving the evils of the past and sometimes did not sleep for days. During this time, I was seeing a therapist once a week and had become so proficient in deceiving her that I was able to obtain more pain medication with ease. At the same time, I was screaming inside, fighting for my life against this unknown opponent that seemed to dominate my every word and action. It seemed like no one could hear me crying out for help. I felt guilty and ashamed, struggling to break free of the mental trap I was in. I was told I had an incurable mental illness that I would have to learn to live with for the rest of my life. I felt that all hope was lost. A friend of mine who knew of some of the struggles I was having gave me the number of a practitioner from this church. I guess the devil knew if I called that number, it would be cast out, because it came at me with increased force, suggesting that I would be better off dead. That night I took a very large dose of pills, and after some deeply disturbing thoughts, mixed with pleading to God for my life, I fell asleep. The next morning I was angry and yet very relieved that I was still alive. All day I struggled to make the call, and by evening I had finally won the battle. Exhausted, I called the practitioner. It sounded like the voice of an angel, and I knew right then I had been saved. For the first time in my life, I cried tears of relief for that little girl who was so lost and now was found. My practitioner reached right in and pulled me out. I was never so happy to see the light of day in all my life. With conviction and authority, she filled my thought with so much truth that there was no cause to argue. When she finished speaking, I knew I was the daughter of the King, and my inheritance was heaven. Since that day, I have experienced many healings, each unfolding more understanding in my relationship with God. I no longer feel that my life is out of control. I have never taken another pill and found no need to continue therapy. My mind is clear, and the sting of the past is gone. I know that God heard my cries and has never withheld his hand from me. I wake up each morning to greet the world with a heart filled with gratitude to God for the life he has given me. This healing has enabled me to use the talents God gave me to create paintings for their church magazine that express God's love for his children. It has also given me the confidence and wisdom to build and open a pottery shop, which enables children who have been labeled handicapped to be both seen and heard through the artistic expression of the true beauty that lies within them. It has changed the atmosphere of my home, enabling my family and friends to experience God's presence. My heart overflows with love for the opportunities I have been given to use this science for the glory of God. I'm so grateful to be alive and working to fulfill his purpose. So grateful for my practitioner and Mary Baker Eddy for bringing truth into my life and waking me up from the deep sleep I was in. So grateful to God for all I've been given. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Colleen from Massachusetts, go ahead.
Good evening. I would like to give gratitude to a wonderful practitioner in the church who has opened my eyes to not try, but to actually work in the science and to do good. And not to try, but to work and to do good and to put into place the ideas that I'm learning here. I'd also like to thank Luann for the last Bible study last week. The Bible study last week was just so filled with love. It was real. And it makes such a difference because you can just feel God's presence. And I like so much Luann's paintings and her testimony. She's an inspiration to me, as well as so many people in this church. And I'd like to give thanks for the readings tonight and the music. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Elizabeth from Georgia, go ahead.
Good evening. I wanted to just express gratitude tonight for all the church is doing and offers to the world in the way of Bible studies, lessons, roundtables, articles on the website. I had the pleasure today of helping to edit the Love is a Liberator magazine, which should be published soon. And the theme is on employment, and it is full of really inspiring and helpful articles and testimonies. And since I've been working myself with the idea of right activity and supply, it was a wonderful treatment for me to work on that. I would just like to quote something that was in that, and it was from Divinity course in General Collectania. Mrs. Eddy says, "Could we but fill our consciousness with the thought that every individual idea of God is as fixed in its place in divine mind as the steadfast stars in their orbits, it would help to dispel the illusion that any of God's children is out of a position, displaced, out of line with the source of supply. No one of that universe, which is unseen and eternal, is ever out of place, for God is without variableness or shadow of turning, and his ideas reflect stability." Well, that was just a tidbit. There are many more really helpful articles in there that will be a source of help to many dealing with that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Michael from California, go ahead.
Thank you for the readings. A few days ago, I was getting off the subway train, and actually on the way to my stop, I was really tired and I was dozing off, and I had this very strong suggestion to start praying for protection from evil. And I carry the book Watches, Prayers, and Arguments in my bag, and I opened it up and used one of the watches in there that is very specific to that. And I wasn't sure what I was going to face, but I knew enough to listen when something like that comes to my thought. And I got off the train, and it was late at night, and I started walking home, and across the street I could see two men sort of keeping pace with me. And right away, I was just aware, I guess I could say I could almost feel that something was off. But I continued walking home. I crossed the street, and I could see that these men were not too far away from me. I don't live in the nicest neighborhood, so at some point I just became very aware that these men were quite possibly trying to approach me to possibly rob me or hurt me. And I realized I probably would not be able to run home and make it there because of the bag I had. And so the thought came to me to stop under a streetlight. There was a homeless guy going through trash behind me, and I pulled out my phone, and these were like instructions that were coming to me as I was there. It wasn't something I planned ahead, but I pulled out my phone and acted like I was on the phone with maybe the police. And as they approached me, I put my phone away, and there were a few more people on the street, and these two men stopped. They had their hands in their pocket. They looked at me, and I was, physically speaking, a sitting duck, but I was, in my mind, repeating what I had been reading in the book a little while ago. And these men just stopped. They paused, and then they cut across the street diagonally and went separate ways. And I think they did that because they were probably trying to evade being stopped by the police. And I walked back to my apartment after they left and went upstairs, and I realized how I'd been protected and guided. And I realized that the practical nature of what this church teaches again and again and again proves itself in those kinds of situations. So just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you. Fairley from Maryland, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the beautiful readings on Christian Science. I was just thinking tonight about how grateful I am to God for giving us Jesus, and then here in America, Mrs. Eddy, who gave us Christian Science. It's such a blessing. And in my midlife, I found Christian Science. And I read Science and Health and knew it was the truth. But I was not getting the kind of teaching or help I needed to practice it. And so I became, actually, with many responsibilities in my own life, I became very depressed to such an extent that I was put in the hospital 5 years in a row. Then, thanks to our website, I found Plainfield, and my life began to turn around. With all the help I received here from my practitioner and from all the help that's available here, I was able to learn more about how to practice Christian Science correctly. Thank you very much for this meeting tonight. I'm very grateful to be here.
Thank you. Day, go ahead.
This is Day. Thank you. I'm thankful for today's calendar quote, which reads, "Because Jesus knew the truth and never doubted it, he did his mighty works." Since beginning my study of Christian Science, it's changed my life by giving me a clearer vision and understanding of the truth. One of the greatest truths that I've learned is that God, good, is omnipotent. And from John chapter 14, verse 10, the Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. This is the truth that I'm learning to never doubt, but rather to lean on with all my might daily, especially when faced with challenges or difficulty. As a result, I'm seeing daily proof that there is nothing impossible to God. I'm so grateful for this realization of the truth which has always been. It's the greatest blessing. Thank you so much for tonight's readings and for all the testimonies given so far. I'm very grateful to be here tonight.
Thank you. Jeremy.
I'm very grateful for the practical instruction given here in Plainfield that is showing me how to deal effectively with fearful thoughts as they might arise. Recently, we had a few storms that threatened to disrupt the work at this church. The first one took out my internet, but in the meantime, I was able to use my phone's internet for most things I needed, and also was able to use the internet at the church. And I had a lot to do that didn't require being online, like preparing the first draft of this month's magazine. So all went well, and within 3 days it was back. The second storm, however, seemed intent on stopping last Wednesday's testimony meeting. My practitioner was insistent that the storm could not impede the work we do for God, and made sure that Tuesday's Unity Watch reflected that. Speaking with her always leaves me with a very sure sense that nothing can possibly interfere with the mission of this church. I'm so grateful for that. And despite how the storm appeared on Wednesday, I kept knowing that there is no power apart from God. This allowed me to do what I needed to do all day long, and then be ready for the broadcast. As we know, the music was definitely not 100%, but everything else came through, and the final product now sounds just like any other meeting. I'm so grateful that God kept everything moving forward. It's so wonderful. Finally, immediately after the service ended, the snow ended as well. It was so very plain to me that it was indeed an attempt to stop the meeting and nothing else, and it didn't work. Very grateful for all I'm learning here that helps me face these situations without being ruled by fear. This is only possible because of what I'm learning about Christian Science and practitioner support. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda.
Thank you for the readings and the music and the testimonies tonight. I'd like to express my gratitude for how the Plainfield Church has been changing and blessing my life in many ways. Today, while out, a neighbor made a comment on how the time change is beating her up. I had totally forgotten about it, except that I was enjoying the extra light. This is actually a miracle, because this has never happened that I recall in the past. Especially the spring time change would be very hard for me, sometimes for weeks. I attribute this to the new feelings and lessons I'm learning about time and seasons taught here. I used many tools and ideas before the time change came, and one was very important, which was having an attitude of gratitude rather than letting any thought of fear or complaint, especially complaint, come in. And also, one of my morning routines is to read or listen to the article Day by Bicknell Young that you can find on our website. I am so grateful to be learning how to turn my days and time over to God's care. Thank you.
Thank you. Florence from Georgia, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the beautiful music tonight and the service and all the testimonies so far. I am so grateful for Christian Science, and my gratitude is mostly because it is through Christian Science that I learn what love really means. Before, it was all the interpretations of how humanly we are to have personalities and love them and all this. But true love that Mrs. Eddy has emphasized as part or the main thing in this Christian Science ministry has really changed my life. It is here in this church, the teachings that were given here some time ago and still continues, is where I learned what this true love is. She says love anyway, just love. And she also in Science and Health says, love for God and man is the true incentive in both healing and teaching. Learning this, I remember some time ago, one of the tapes from this church, Mrs. Evans would say, love out. And she explained it, that just love. At least every day find something to love. In other words, some claim in the world to know the truth about. That impressed me so, and it really means when you put it in practice that every day there is something you can pray for, something that you can really know the truth, which is that the opposite is saying. You just know the truth about it. And when I put that in practice, it has helped me tremendously. In fact, it's helped me to forget some of the so-called problems that I had and really brought me closer to God, to really learn how to love, to know that everyone is in God's care, everyone is God's idea, not to see people as personalities and hold on to the resentment and the anger and all the things that come with that kind of thinking. I am so grateful for Mrs. Eddy because this love it's not talked about anywhere. I know I wouldn't have found it anywhere else. And what it has done in my life, I cannot thank her enough. I thank Christ Jesus, God, for giving us this science through Mrs. Eddy. And I just pray that consistently what he has given us, we can also share for others to come to him. Thank you for all the testimonies so far. Thanks for the service.
Thank you. Mary.
Good evening. I'll read from one submission from our church website bulletin board, and it's from Virginia. I cannot express enough gratitude for this Sunday service. I don't know where to begin. From the inspirational lesson sermon, the scriptural readings, the beautiful hymns and music, I was so taken back on how harmonious it all was. Members from all parts of the country coming together in such beautiful unity to present a service to the receptive thought in the world, and as stated, for those participating. Let's work in unity to make it a wonderful service that reaches beyond our membership to those in need. She was quoting from our website. That was what this service was today. Every detail, even Gary saying quietly, Amen, after the beautiful music which was sung with such humility at the end of the service. Such respect, love, quietude, created in mind, God's gift to the world. A person that wrote this is fairly new to our church. She contributed on Sunday by reading the fruitage, and I thought how very grateful I am for all of our members, local and out of town, and how they are stepping up and contributing in so many different ways to make for a healing service. It's everyone praying and working in unity and loving this science and putting it first in their lives. It creates a tremendous healing power. We heard it again tonight from the very beginning with the beautiful music played by our organist Jim, and then the beautiful readings prepared by Florence, and then everyone coming with their heart's rich overflow, their gratitude to God for all the good that He has given to us, His children. I'm so very grateful to be here with you all tonight, and have a good evening.
Thank you.